Fog rolled in heavy curtains across the London docks, muffling the clamor of midnight labor. A single lamp flickered outside Warehouse 12, its glow pooling around the fallen body of Veronica Blakely, heiress, socialite, and notorious collector of rare jewels. Her fingers were stiff around a velvet box torn open beside her, its contents missing. An antique sapphire pendant said to bring ruin to whomever dared to steal it. As police whistles cut through the fog, a small, impeccably dressed man stepped beneath the lamp. Chapter 1. The Body at Warehouse 12. Fog clung to the London docks with a ghostly persistence, the night air thick with the scent of salt, oil, and the distant rumble of cargo cranes settling into their midnight pause. The lamps along the wharf flickered as though breathing, their feeble light cutting only shallow swaths through the swirling mist. It was here, in this dim, echoing labyrinth of crates and steel chains, that tragedy had chosen to unfold with unsettling precision. Warehouse 12 loomed in the haze, its red brick facade slick with condensation, its great iron doors cracked open just enough for a single beam of lamplight to seep across the wet ground. That pale beam stretched toward a figure lying motionless on the stones, a shape too elegant and too still to belong to the ordinary bustle of the docks. Veronica Blakely, heiress, socialite, collector of rare jewels, and a woman whose name echoed through fashionable circles like a whispered scandal, lay sprawled with a strange grace, as though arranging herself in her final moment. Her evening gown shimmered faintly beneath the thin light, the sequins catching what illumination they could. Her blonde hair lay fanned around her head, motionless except for the occasional disturbance by the cold wind sweeping off the Thames. Her gloved hand rested beside an overturned velvet jewelry box, its lid torn open, its contents gone. The sapphire pendant, an antique gem rumored to bring misfortune to any who mishandled it, had vanished. Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard crouched beside the body, his rough hands steady despite the cold. He inspected the area with seasoned eyes, noting the broken crate nearby, the deep scratches on its surface, and a few scattered splinters that suggested a hurried scuffle. "Looks like a botched robbery," he muttered. "Someone tried to snatch the pendant. She resisted. Things went wrong." But a voice behind him disagreed at once, soft yet unmistakably confident. "Non, mon ami. This, what you call a scuffle, is not so simple." Hercule Poirot stepped into the ring of lamplight with the quiet dignity of a man who needed no introduction. Small, impeccably dressed, and immaculately composed even on the damp, grimy docks, he surveyed the scene with half-closed eyes and a carefully measured breath. His neatly waxed mustache gleamed faintly in the fog as he knelt beside the fallen woman. Poirot touched nothing. Not at first. His eyes roamed, like a practiced surgeon's, noting the angle of Veronica's limbs, the placement of the box, the faint impression of her heels in the wet ground. "A robbery?" He gave a small shrug. "Perhaps, but thieves, mon ami, do not behave like poets composing a tableau." Japp straightened, rubbing his hands together for warmth. "Tableau? This looks like panic. Smash a crate, grab what they can, run." Poirot gently lifted the velvet box with his gloved fingers. "Observe. The box. Its lid torn, yes, but the interior is pristine. The jewel removed with care, not torn from its setting. And more curious still, the box itself is placed beside the hand almost deliberately. Had the thief been in a frenzy, this would have been discarded, perhaps trampled, not arranged." Japp frowned. "Arranged? Why would someone—" "To create an illusion," Poirot finished. "A false picture to distract the eye of the casual inspector. But alas, Poirot is not casual." He set the box down, then leaned an inch closer to Veronica's right heel. A smear of clay, rich red like rust but unmistakably soil, clung to the edge of her shoe. Poirot lifted a brow. This is not dock soil. The earth here is dark, nearly black. This red clay, it comes from elsewhere. Meaning what? Japp asked. Meaning, Poirot said calmly, that Mademoiselle was somewhere else, somewhere with red clay, shortly before her death. Perhaps she even met someone. She then came here by choice, not by force. Japp crossed his arms. And that leads you to believe this wasn't a robbery? No, Inspector, it suggests something far more deliberate. Poirot stood, brushed his gloves together, and turned as hurried footsteps approached through the fog. A young man emerged, tall, sharply dressed in a midnight suit, though the confidence such attire suggested was betrayed by trembling hands. Marcus Dane, Veronica's business partner and, as gossip insisted, a close friend of hers in matters both professional and personal. Marcus's face was pale beneath the dock lamps. Inspector Japp? Someone said Veronica was here. I came as soon as I heard. His voice cracked as he caught sight of her body. Good Lord. Veronica. Poirot watched him with careful interest. Monsieur Dane, may I inquire, why were you expected here? Marcus swallowed hard. She sent me a message earlier. Told me to meet her at Warehouse 12, said it was urgent. I didn't know. He looked away, struggling. Poirot tilted his head. She asked you to come. Yet she did not seem to have awaited company. There is only one set of footprints leading to this location, and none leading away. Japp glanced down, startled. He's right. No tracks other than hers. And ours. Marcus looked between them, his breath quickening. Are you implying I had something to do with this? Poirot lifted a placating hand. Not at all, monsieur. I imply only what the evidence reveals. And tonight, the evidence whispers, not shouts. He paced slowly around the body, stopping as something caught his eye. A shred of fabric, bright crimson against the muted tones of the docks. It clung to a protruding nail in one of the smashed crates, fluttering gently. Poirot plucked it free. The cloth was expensive, finely woven, unmistakably part of a tailored garment. Not dock worker attire, not Veronica's dress, something else entirely. Interesting, he murmured. Very interesting. Japp peered over his shoulder. Looks like part of a coat lining. Oui, and it will belong to someone who was here before us, someone close enough to this crate to snag their clothing, yet we see no footprints. How does someone reach this crate without touching the ground? Poirot paused. Unless the footprints were washed away. We haven't had rain. True. But the tide... Poirot pointed toward the river's edge where waves lapped hungrily. A boat could have brought someone directly to the mouth of the warehouse. No need to step far into the open. Marcus shivered. So someone came by water? To meet Veronica? Poirot turned sharply, studying the young man's trembling hands. You knew her well, did you not? What was her mood today? She was anxious, Marcus admitted. More than anxious, fearful. She kept talking about the pendant, said it had brought attention she didn't want. Poirot raised an eyebrow. Ah, yes, the pendant. A beautiful stone with a legend darker than its hue. A curse, they say, for any who desire it too greatly. Japp snorted. Curses. Lovely for bedtime stories, useless for solving a murder. Perhaps, Poirot said mildly. And yet, sometimes belief in such things can drive people to destructive choices. He drifted back toward Veronica's body, staring with a kind of mournful respect. She was dressed for an evening affair, not the sort of woman to wander docks alone without reason. She expected someone. The question, Inspector, is who? Japp rubbed the back of his neck. Let's start with something simple. Motive. The pendant vanished. It's valuable enough to tempt thieves, collectors, even family. Yes, Poirot said. Precisely valuable enough to tempt people who mask greed behind charm. His eyes flicked again toward Marcus Dane, who bristled. You think I killed her for a jewel? I think, Poirot replied quietly, that until we understand why Mademoiselle came here, everyone is a possibility. Marcus stepped back, running a hand through his hair. She told me she'd uncovered something dangerous. She wouldn't say what, but she insisted she needed to protect herself. Did she name anyone? Poirot asked. No. Did she say what danger? No. Only that the pendant wasn't the only thing at stake. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Ah, now we approach the truth. The fog thickened, coiling around the trio like silent spectators as constables moved about in hushed tones. A boat horn sounded mournfully somewhere downstream. The docks felt colder with every passing second. Poirot suddenly crouched, inspecting the ground near Veronica's left side. There, half concealed beneath her bodice, was something glinting faintly. He retrieved it. A small metal clasp, bent slightly with traces of fabric still attached. The clasp matched the torn red fabric. Jap tensed. Someone grappled with her? Poirot shook his head. No. She grabbed this from someone, a desperate act perhaps in self-defense, and she held on to it until the last. Only her body shifted after death, causing it to slip beneath her. Marcus blanched. So she wasn't alone. Someone was here with her, close enough for her to fight back. Poirot nodded slowly. Yes, monsieur. And Veronica Blakely, even in death, has given us a clue. He straightened, holding the clasp up to the bleak light. This scrap, Poirot said softly, belongs to the killer. The wind surged suddenly, carrying with it the metallic scent of the river, the echo of distant horns, and the uneasy silence of the dead. Poirot tucked the evidence gently into an envelope, sealing it with decisive calm. We stand at the beginning of a trail woven with deception, he said. But make no mistake, Hercule Poirot will follow every thread, for even the most carefully crafted lie cannot hide from the little gray cells. Marcus swallowed hard, as though realizing the implications. Jap surveyed the dock workers gathering far away behind their lines of tape, the mist rising around them like restless spirits. Poirot stepped away from the body once more, gazing beyond the warehouse door toward the dark river. The killer, he whispered, has already made their first mistake. He turned back to Jap, eyes gleaming sharply beneath the lamplight. And I, Hercule Poirot, have already seen it. Chapter 2. A Household of Secrets. The Blakely estate rose from the fog like a brooding fortress, its tall chimneys exhaling thin tendrils of smoke that curled into the morning air. The mansion's stone facade, weathered yet unyielding, seemed to stare down at visitors with cold indifference, as though it had long since learned to endure whatever human misery unfolded within its walls. A single gravel drive cut through the expansive grounds, winding like a cautious serpent toward the grand entrance. At this hour, the windows glowed with the faint amber warmth of gas lamps. Yet the atmosphere felt anything but welcoming. Poirot stepped from the constable's car with the precision of a man stepping onto a stage. He adjusted his lapels, smoothed his mustache, and cast a brief, thorough glance across the estate. As the morning fog dissipated, he noted the subtle details. Fresh tire tracks leading toward the stables, the hurried footprints in the dew-soaked lawn, and the half-drawn curtains in the east wing as though someone had been watching for their arrival. Inspector Jap joined him with a huff, shoving his gloved hands into his coat pockets. Never liked coming here, he muttered. Families with money. Always twice the secrets, half the cooperation. Poirot smiled faintly. Ah, but secrets, mon ami, are like dust. They gather in corners, they cling to surfaces, and with the right light, One sees them clearly. A footman opened the grand oak doors before they could knock. His expression was strained, his posture rigid, and Poirot noted at once the slight tremor in the man's right hand. "Gentlemen," the footman said, "Lord Adrian awaits you in the drawing-room." They were led through a long corridor where portraits lined the walls, stern ancestors with fixed gazes, their gilded frames reflecting the gaslight. The faces seemed to follow the trio as they walked, their expressions frozen somewhere between judgment and accusation. Inside the drawing-room, Lord Adrian Blakeley stood near the marble fireplace, framed by the towering mantel and the glow of burning logs. His shoulders were square, his posture impeccable, his expression carved from stone. He wore a tailored navy suit, though Poirot's practiced eye caught subtle signs of disarray. Sleeves not perfectly aligned, collar slightly askew, and a faint smudge of something dark, ink or soil, on his cuff. "Inspector," Adrian said curtly. "Monsieur Poirot." Poirot bowed his head politely. "My condolences, my lord. Your sister's death is a tragedy." Adrian's jaw tightened. Veronica was reckless, unpredictable. She surrounded herself with questionable company and indulged in pursuits that invited trouble. This pendant business, utter nonsense. Poirot stepped nearer, his gaze soft but penetrating. "You speak of her with criticism, not grief," Adrian exhaled sharply. "You must understand, monsieur. My sister and I were not close. She managed the family trusts. She refused my requests for investment funds. She believed herself cleverer than everyone else. And lately," he hesitated, "she became impossible, paranoid." "Paranoid about what?" Japp asked. "I don't know," Adrian said stiffly. "Or rather, I wasn't inclined to entertain her hysteria." Poirot circled the room slowly, noting details. A pair of reading chairs angled slightly toward the windows, a newspaper folded perfectly on a side table, and on the mantel, an ornate clock wound precisely to the second. Order everywhere, perhaps too much order. A soft rustle drew their attention. A young woman stood at the threshold, clutching a handkerchief tightly enough to wrinkle it. Evelyn Hargrove, Veronica's assistant. Her eyes were swollen from crying, though the grief seemed mixed with fear or guilt or both. "Evelyn," Adrian said, his tone sharp, "you may speak only if necessary." Poirot turned to her gently. "Mademoiselle, you assisted Mademoiselle Veronica closely, did you not?" "Yes," Evelyn whispered. "I managed her correspondence, her appointments, everything she needed. You knew her well?" "I thought I did," she murmured. "But these last few days—" She was afraid, terribly afraid. Poirot's brows lifted slightly. "Ah? And what was the source of this fear?" Evelyn hesitated, glancing toward Adrian. Poirot followed her gaze, then addressed Adrian directly. "Milord, may we speak to Mademoiselle Evelyn privately?" Adrian's nostrils flared. "Anything she tells you will only lead you down foolish paths. My sister's anxiety was of her own making." "Nevertheless," Poirot said, "one must hear all voices." Adrian paused, then gestured dismissively. "Fine, but keep it brief." As he exited, Poirot carefully watched the stiff set of Adrian's shoulders, the controlled stride, too controlled. A man with something clenched beneath the surface. When the door closed, Evelyn's composure collapsed like a fragile structure losing its support. Tears spilled over and she clutched her handkerchief as though it were the only thing anchoring her. "Please," she whispered, "please don't let him hear me say more. He'll be furious." Poirot moved to comfort her with gentle calm. "You may speak freely, mademoiselle. The truth is the key to all things." She sniffed, nodding shakily. "Veronica told me that someone had threatened her. She didn't say who, but she kept looking over her shoulder. She checked the locks 3 times each night. She wouldn't go anywhere without the pendant. She said it was her only leverage. Leverage against whom? Poirot asked softly. I don't know, Evelyn replied, voice breaking. She only said that if anything happened to her, it would be because she finally discovered the truth about someone she once trusted. Poirot nodded slowly. And did she leave any written records of her thoughts? Evelyn hesitated. Her journal. But Adrian took it this morning. He said it was private family business. Poirot exchanged a sharp glance with Jap. I see, Poirot murmured. And what of last night? Did you see her before she left? Yes, Evelyn said. She received a letter. I didn't see the contents, but she went pale. She asked me to prepare her coat, then rushed out. A letter, Poirot repeated. Did she indicate who it was from? No. But she was afraid. Evelyn's nod was small but certain. Poirot approached the window, gazing across the estate. The morning sun cast long, thin shadows across the lawn where gardeners moved quietly. Something near Veronica's personal study window caught his eye. A faint discoloration in the carpet visible through the glass. He moved swiftly toward the study. Evelyn followed with visible anxiety. Is something wrong? In the matter of murder, Poirot said, many things are wrong. He opened the study door and gestured for Jap's attention. The carpet near Veronica's desk bore a tiny smear of red clay, the same shade Poirot had found on Veronica's heels. Poirot crouched, examining the stain closely. She was here before she died, he murmured. She stepped in something. No, she brought something into the house. Jap looked around. Clay. But from where? Poirot stood, dusting his gloves. That, Inspector, is one question, but another is far more pressing. Which is? Poirot turned toward the hallway where Adrian's shadow lingered just out of sight. Who, Poirot said, knew she had returned here before going to the docks? The answer remained unspoken, but it hung in the air with suffocating weight. Poirot took a slow breath, gazing around the immaculate study. This house, he said quietly, is filled with secrets, and one of them has already killed. He stepped toward the door, leaving Evelyn trembling beside the desk. Come, Inspector, Poirot said. The scent of truth is faint, but it is here. And with that, the investigation deepened, threading its way into the very heart of the Blakely estate. Chapter 3. The House of Tangled Shadows. The next morning dawned with a thin, wintry light that dripped through the tall windows of Thornbury Grange like cold milk through gauze. Poirot had slept little. Though he would never confess it aloud, puzzles of the human heart often kept him more wakeful than puzzles of logic. As he dressed meticulously, brushing each sleeve smooth, polishing the silver thread buttons of his waistcoat, he replayed the previous day's revelations with the stubborn precision of a man unwilling to let a single detail escape his net. By 8 o'clock he was downstairs where the household had gathered with the same brittle stillness as glass figurines arranged in a cabinet. The scent of fresh bread did little to warm the atmosphere. Instead, it accentuated the quiet tension. Lady Rosalind sat nearest the window, staring out as though the frost-stained garden might offer her absolution. Opposite her, Sir Malcolm was drinking aggressively, using his teacup as though it were a shield. Clara Davenport scribbled furiously in a small notebook, her eyes flitting between the residents with the restless curiosity of a fox at the henhouse door. Dr. Brigham stood apart, rolling a cigarette he did not light, his face unreadable. Poirot entered the room, greeted them with a polite mes amis, and accepted a cup of tea from a maid whose trembling hands betrayed her efforts at composure. There will be questions this morning, he announced calmly, and with your indulgence, answers. Sir Malcolm snorted. You speak as though you expect cooperation from this collection of liars. Poirot's eyebrow arched. Ah, but sometimes, Sir Malcolm, the liar reveals as much truth as the honest man, if one listens with care. Lady Rosalind flinched, and Poirot noted it. He allowed silence to steep into the room before he continued. This house, your house, is full of shadows, and each shadow conceals a thread that leads either to guilt or to clarity. Today we shall begin tugging at these threads. Clara perked up immediately. Interviews, then? One-on-one? Excellent. I've brought shorthand. You will not be present, Poirot replied gently. But later, Miss Davenport, perhaps you will tell me a few things. For now, patience. She huffed, but the sparkle in her eyes remained. He began with Lady Rosalind. Rosalind led Poirot to the music room where the cold keys of the piano glared like rows of small, accusing teeth. She stood beside the instrument, clutching a silk handkerchief. Lady Rosalind, Poirot began, last night you spoke of memory, of regret. It is time to clarify. What was your relationship with Miss Fairfax before her death? Rosalind closed her eyes briefly as though fighting back a tide. I resented her, Monsieur Poirot. Because she took your position? Or because she took your husband's admiration? Her eyes flew open, startled. You think I was jealous? Poirot gave a small shrug. I think jealousy is a vine that grows quietly, wrapping itself around the heart until it squeezes. Tell me. Rosalind exhaled slowly. Edmund didn't simply leave me. Our marriage had been strained for years. We became strangers who occupied the same rooms. When Eleanor arrived, bright, musical, adored by the villagers, I saw in her everything I once was, hopeful, alive, beautiful. She was a mirror reflecting what I had lost. Poirot listened without interruption. Rosalind's voice was not that of a murderer, but of a woman drowning slowly in her own reflection. And the pendant? He asked softly. Her grip tightened on her handkerchief. I never touched it, but I know it meant something to her, something private. Private enough to kill for? A tremor crossed her expression like a shadow flickering over water. I would never harm her. Poirot nodded but noted her hesitation, her grief or her guilt he could not yet tell. His interview with Sir Malcolm followed in the study, a room smelling of cigars and leather, the stale perfume of masculinity curated over decades. Get on with it, Malcolm growled, pouring whiskey through the clock had barely struck 10. Poirot refused a drink. You disliked Miss Fairfax, Poirot stated plainly. I disliked her effect on my family, Malcolm corrected, pacing before the mantel. Edmund deserted his responsibilities because of that girl's whims. Whims. She convinced him the Grange was stifling him, encouraged him to leave, promised a life of adventure. Rubbish. He was a man of duty, family, heritage. Poirot clasped his hands behind him. Yet he left. Malcolm's jaw clenched. And look where it got him. Dead. Poirot's voice softened. Your son made choices to escape something. A weight. Perhaps more than simply duty? Malcolm glared. Are you implying I forced him out? No. I imply nothing. I ask. The baronet threw his glass into the fire. It shattered with a crack that reverberated through the old stones. Miss Fairfax meddled. She filled his head with nonsense about freedom. She destroyed him. Poirot absorbed this quietly. And so last night you searched her belongings? He asked. Malcolm stiffened. How? You smell of her room's lavender sachets, Poirot replied matter-of-factly. A scent that does not suit your character. Malcolm's face reddened like a struck ember. I wanted to know if she left a letter. Something about Edmund. Something that explained why he... He faltered. Poirot saw the truth then. A father bulldozed by grief, thrashing for answers in the dark. You found nothing, Poirot said gently. Malcolm shook his head. For now, that is all. Clara Davenport greeted Poirot in the library with barely contained excitement. "You've spoken to the others?" she asked. "Good, I've been dying to talk." "An unfortunate choice of words, mademoiselle," Poirot murmured. "But proceed." Clara hopped onto the edge of a table with unladylike ease and swung her legs. "Eleanor Fairfax, interesting girl, too clever for her own good. She asked the wrong questions." Poirot leaned forward. "What questions?" "About Edmund's last week alive, about his final days away from London. She somehow knew there was a gap, a window of time no one accounted for. She asked why I never published anything about it." "And why did you not?" Clara tensed. It was subtle, but Poirot caught it. "Because," she said slowly, "sometimes editors cut things. Sometimes stories are inconvenient." Poirot allowed silence to stretch. "And you?" he asked at last. "Did you resent Miss Fairfax for probing too deeply?" Clara smiled, a thin, sharp expression. "If I killed everyone who annoyed me, Monsieur Poirot, London would be empty." "A humorous remark," Poirot said, "but not quite an answer." She shrugged. "Eleanor had secrets. So did Edmund. I merely watched." Poirot noted the words, the tone. There was more, but not yet. Dr. Brigham's interview was the most clinical, held near the conservatory where the faint scent of soil pieced through the chilly air. "She was healthy," he said before Poirot could speak. "Whatever happened, it wasn't illness." "Natural causes were never suspected," Poirot replied. "Tell me, doctor, how well did you know Miss Fairfax?" "Well enough." His eyes darted away. "She came to me several times seeking information about Edmund's injury." "Injury?" The doctor froze. Poirot waited. Finally Brigham sighed, shoulders sagging. "A broken rib. 2 months before his death. Claimed he fell. From a horse." "But you did not believe him?" "No," the doctor whispered. "It looked more like he'd been struck." Poirot felt the room sharpen around them. "Who struck him?" Poirot asked quietly. "I don't know. Or rather, I cannot say." Poirot stepped closer. "Doctor, a life has been taken. Another perhaps unjustly ended before it. Silence serves only the killer." Brigham swallowed hard. "I will tell you this. Edmund was terrified during that last visit. He kept glancing toward the door, as though he expected someone to drag him back." Poirot's heartbeat quickened, not with excitement, but with the unmistakable recognition of a truth beginning to unfurl. When the interviews concluded, Poirot retreated to the east corridor, the sun now slanting through the stained glass windows to cast fractured emerald and ruby across the floor. He could feel the Grange watching him, its walls thick with secrets, its air humming under the weight of whispered betrayals. 4 suspects, 4 stories, 4 versions of truth, and in every one, another presence lurked behind the words. Unspoken, elusive, like a 5th shadow in a quartet. Poirot paused before Eleanor's sealed room, fingers touching the cold brass handle. Inside lay answers. But also danger, for wherever truth hid, the murderer was close enough to hear its stirring. And Hercule Poirot, though no stranger to peril, felt the unmistakable prickle of eyes watching him from somewhere down the corridor. A soft creak echoed behind him. Poirot turned. The hall was empty, but the shadows were growing longer. Chapter 4. Whispers behind the locked door. A hush lay over Thornbury Grange as noon approached, the kind of hush not born of peace but of held breath. Poirot, having fortified himself with a modest luncheon and an immodest amount of reflection, ascended once more toward the east wing. The corridor stretched before him like a long, pale throat, narrow, silent, and lined with ancestral portraits whose oil-painted eyes followed him with grim curiosity. At the end of that hallway waited Eleanor Fairfax's room, still locked under Inspector Graves's orders. Poirot paused before it, running a gloved finger along the intricate carving on the door. Thorn leaves, roses, and, curiously, serpents woven among them, a motif of beauty twined with danger. He bent toward the keyhole. Absolute darkness stared back. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "even the air hides in this place." He straightened just as soft footsteps approached from behind. It was Miss Davenport, her notebook clutched like a weapon. "Still locked, then?" "For now," Poirot replied, not turning. She leaned closer, eyes sparkling. "I heard from a maid that Eleanor kept journals. Several. She wrote constantly. If they're in there." Poirot held up a hand. "Mademoiselle, when one looks too hungrily at secrets, one risks being mistaken for someone desperate to conceal them." Clara bristled. "I don't conceal anything." "Then perhaps," Poirot said gently, "you should begin." She opened her mouth, but footsteps echoed again, this time heavier, more deliberate. Inspector Graves strode toward them, keys jangling at his belt. "Monsieur Poirot," he said bluntly, "I assume you want a look inside?" Poirot smiled. "Inspector, you possess the rare talent of making understatement an art." Graves grunted, unlocked the door, and pushed it open. The room exhaled a faint, dusty sigh. Light seeped through thin curtains, illuminating a space neat enough to seem empty, yet charged with an intensity that prickled Poirot's senses. The small writing desk, the carefully made bed, the traveling trunk at the foot, each stood precisely arranged, almost staged. But Poirot knew better. Lives were not arranged. They revealed themselves in corners, creases, discarded oddities. He moved slowly, reverently. "This desk," he murmured, "when was used recently. See the faint imprint left by the pen? The inkwell is not dry." Clara hovered just outside the threshold, desperate but forbidden to enter. Inspector Graves crossed his arms. "We searched it. Nothing unusual." Poirot opened the top drawer. Empty. Too empty. "A drawer tells its own story," he said. "This one says I had contents, and now I do not." Graves shrugged. "We checked. No journals, no letters." Poirot crouched and examined the underside of the drawer, then the back panel. Nothing. He checked the trunk, the wardrobe, the vanity. At last he approached the bedside table. He opened the drawer. Inside lay a single object. A handkerchief embroidered with a delicate R. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Lady Rosalind," he whispered. Graves frowned. "A gift, perhaps?" "No," Poirot murmured. "The scent. Violets. Lady Rosalind's perfume. Fresh. She was here recently." Clara gasped from outside the doorway. Poirot rose. "Inspector, Lady Rosalind said last night she had not been near this room since Miss Fairfax moved in. Yet this tells a different tale." Before Graves could respond, footsteps echoed again, this time hesitant and accompanied by the faint tap of a walking stick. Dr. Brigham appeared in the doorway, pale, drawn. "Pardon me," he said. "The maid told me you were here. I may have information you need." Poirot gestured for him to enter. But before Brigham could step forward, he staggered, gripping the doorframe. Sweat purled on his brow. "Doctor," Poirot said sharply, "you are unwell." Brigham shook his head. "No, it's nothing. I remembered something Eleanor asked me, something I dismissed as fanciful." Poirot stepped closer. "Tell me." The doctor lowered his voice to a trembling whisper. "She believed someone was entering her room at night." Inspector Graves straightened. "Did she have evidence?" "A missing photograph," Brigham said, swallowing hard. "A portrait of Edmund taken weeks before his death. She told me it had vanished from her drawer one morning." Poirot's pulse sharpened. "And when was this?" he asked. "3 days before she died." Poirot turned slowly, eyes sweeping the room again, not as a visitor but as a hunter finally sensing the prey. Someone had searched Eleanor's room before her death. Someone had taken what she guarded. Someone wanted her silence. Poirot began a second, more meticulous examination, directing Graves to fetch a lantern. When the inspector returned, Poirot crouched near the floorboards. "Do you smell it?" he asked. Graves sniffed. "Polish? Old wood?" Poirot shook his head. "Cigarette smoke." Clara, still lingering outside, exclaimed, "Dr. Brigham smokes!" But Poirot did not look at the doctor. His mind replayed the interviews. Sir Malcolm had smelled of lavender from Eleanor's wardrobe. Dr. Brigham smoked, yes, but he rolled his own, leaving a distinctive tobacco scent. This was different. Poirot lifted the lantern closer to the floor. There, a tiny heap of pale ash had gathered in the groove between boards. Not from a hand-rolled cigarette, but from a slender perfume type preferred by women. Poirot murmured, "Not the doctor." The burned aroma hinted at a specific brand, a Parisian brand. He froze. "Lady Rosalind?" No, she used violet perfume, not French cigarettes. "Clara Davenport?" Poirot glanced toward her. Clara stiffened under the scrutiny. "I don't smoke those," she said quickly. Poirot did not respond. The ash, the handkerchief, the missing journal, the stolen photograph, the threads were tightening. And yet, he moved to the wardrobe. Something bothered him there. He opened it and inspected the back panel. A faint indentation marred the wood grain as though it had been pressed repeatedly. He slid his hand down the panel. It moved. A hidden compartment clicked open with a soft sigh. Inspector Graves stepped inside the room. "What the devil?" Poirot reached into the narrow cavity and withdrew a slim notebook bound in green leather. Not one of Eleanor's journals, Edmund's. Brigham gasped. Clara muttered a curse. Even Graves inhaled sharply. Poirot flipped the book open. The first page bore Edmund's handwriting, tight, urgent, slanted. "If anything happens to me, it will not be an accident." Poirot's blood chilled. He continued reading silently, pages crackling like brittle leaves. Mentions of fear, of a quarrel, of a threat spoken in the dead of night, of a promise to protect Eleanor because she knows too much. Poirot shut the book slowly. "This," he said quietly, "is why Eleanor died." Brigham's voice trembled. "Then Edmund was murdered." Poirot did not reply, for in the very moment he closed the notebook, voices rose from downstairs. Shouts, hurried footsteps, the crash of something heavy. Poirot strode to the hallway just as a maid sprinted toward them, face chalk white. "Inspector, Monsieur Poirot, come quickly." Poirot seized her shoulders. "What has happened?" Her lips quivered. "Sir Malcolm, he's collapsed in the drawing room." Poirot exchanged a glance with Graves. The pattern was clear now. Someone was tying off loose ends, and Sir Malcolm Thornbury had just become the next intended silence. Chapter 5. A Poisoned Legacy. The drawing room of Thornbury Grange, usually a proud showcase of ancestral wealth, had transformed into a scene of confusion and dread. Footsteps thudded from every direction, servants clustered at the door like frightened birds. And in the center of the room lay Sir Malcolm Thornbury, half slumped against a velvet settee. His face had turned an alarming shade of ashen gray, his breath rattling faintly like wind caught in a failing bellows. Inspector Graves knelt beside him. "He's alive," he muttered, pressing 2 fingers to the baronet's throat. "Barely." Dr. Brigham pushed past the crowd, dropping to his knees with an urgency Poirot had not yet seen in him. "Move back. Give him space," the doctor commanded. His hands flew over buttons, collar, pulse points. "What happened?" A maid stammered. He was shouting for whiskey. Said his nerves were frayed, then he just fell. Poirot moved quietly around the periphery of the chaos, eyes sweeping the room from corner to corner. The baronet's cigar tray was overturned, its contents spilled like dark teeth across the carpet. A half-filled tumbler of whiskey lay beside Malcolm's hand, amber liquid glistening on the rug. Poirot crouched beside it, careful not to touch. "Doctor," Poirot said softly, "if you please take care with symptoms, they are telling." Brigham, still focused on Malcolm's breathing, nodded distractedly. Constriction of the throat, shallow pulse. He hesitated. "Monsieur Poirot, this resembles poisoning." Gasps rippled through the room. Poirot did not gasp. Instead, he leaned closer to the tumbler. The faintest aroma coiled upward, subtle, herbal, metallic beneath the whiskey's warmth. "Inspector Graves," Poirot said calmly, "I advise you not to allow anyone to leave the house." Graves straightened. "No one's going anywhere." Poirot's gaze swept the faces gathered. Lady Rosalind, pale and shaking, Clara Davenport, scribbling furiously, even as she stared wide-eyed. Dr. Brigham, his hands trembling as he struggled to stabilize Malcolm. And several servants whose fear was genuine but unhelpful. Poirot stood. "Sir Malcolm lives," he announced, "but this attack is not an act of desperation. It is an act of calculation. Someone wished him silent." Lady Rosalind took a step forward, clutching her shawl. "But why Malcolm? Why now?" Poirot fixed his gaze on her. "Because, Madame, Sir Malcolm knew something, whether he realized it or not. Something connected to Edmund's death. And now, with the discovery of Edmund's journal, the murderer fears collapse of the walls they so carefully constructed." Clara snapped her notebook shut. "Then this wasn't spur of the moment. The poison had to be prepared." "Just so," Poirot said, "a plan set in motion long before your arrival." He approached the drinks cabinet. The decanter of whiskey stood uncapped, the glass stopper lying beside it. He lifted the decanter, holding it to the light. Tiny particles drifted within, catching the glow. Poirot's voice chilled. "Inspector, this bottle has been tampered with." Graves swore under his breath. "Then any of us could have drunk from it." "Non," Poirot corrected. "Only Sir Malcolm was intended. The others knew not to touch it." Lady Rosalind inhaled sharply. "You think one of us, someone in this room, knew the whiskey was poisoned?" Poirot studied her face. "That possibility must be examined." Brigham, glancing up from Malcolm, added in a strained tone, "He needs rest and quiet. I'll take him to his room." As the doctor and two footmen carefully lifted Malcolm away, Poirot stepped into the center of the drawing room. "Mes amis," he said, "the time has come for truths." The room emptied of servants at Inspector Graves' stern command. Only the main suspects remained. Poirot turned first to Clara. "You were nearest to the decanter earlier, mademoiselle." Clara's eyes widened. "I took notes in the drawing room hours ago, yes, but I hardly doctored the whiskey." Poirot held her gaze. "You are observant, too observant. Did you see anyone else enter this room today?" Clara hesitated. "I saw a maid, I think, one of the young ones." Inspector Graves' jaw tightened. "Which maid?" "I don't know," Clara said. "They all look alike in those uniforms." Poirot shook his head gently. "Convenient." He turned next to Rosalind. "Lady Rosalind," he said softly, "you are devoted to your husband, yet you fear him. I saw it this morning." Her knees seemed to weaken. She sank into a chair. "You do not understand," she murmured. "Malcolm has always been a stern man, a man of expectations. But fear, no. Only disappointment." Poirot's eyes softened. "Madame, disappointment does not make one seek solace in forbidden wings of the house late at night." Her head snapped up. "I did not." "The handkerchief," Poirot interrupted gently. Found in Eleanor's room. Yours. Silence swallowed the room. Rosalind's hands trembled in her lap. I went there only once, she whispered. The night before she died. I wanted to ask her about Edmund, to understand why he left without even a farewell to us. And did she tell you? Poirot asked. Rosalind's throat tightened. No, she begged me to go. Clara leaned forward. Begged? Why? Rosalind shook her head. She said I was in danger just by standing there. Poirot's mind sharpened. Then, Eleanor feared someone in the house, someone near enough to overhear. Rosalind nodded weakly. Poirot turned like a compass needle toward the only remaining suspect. Dr. Brigham. The doctor stiffened under his scrutiny. Surely you don't think, after I just saved Malcolm's life. You attempted to save him, Poirot corrected. But perhaps your expertise is also why the murderer waited. Poisoning in a doctor's presence invites the perfect disguise. Incident, illness, misfortune. Brigham's lip quivered. Poirot, this is madness. Is it? Poirot asked softly. You knew Edmund's injury was no accident. You treated him. You knew he feared someone in this house. You knew more than you confessed. Brigham's face drained of color. Yes, I knew he was afraid, but I didn't know who he feared. Poirot stepped closer. But Eleanor did, and that knowledge killed her. A distant thud echoed through the house, perhaps a door closing, perhaps something more. Poirot tilted his head slightly, listening. The Grange seemed to hum underfoot, vibrating like a held string ready to snap. Inspector Graves, Poirot said gravely. Place guards on every exterior door and postmen on the staircase. The murderer will attempt to flee, or to strike again. Graves nodded sharply and strode out. Poirot returned his attention to the suspects. He let the silence stretch until even Clara stopped breathing. Poirot continued, voice low but unyielding. The poisoner moves quickly, their fear grows, they believe the truth is close, too close. Rosalind whispered, And is it? Close? Poirot inclined his head. Oh yes, very close. He turned toward the doorway. For the murderer stands among us even now. But they forget that Hercule Poirot sees not only the actions but the patterns. And in patterns, the truth hides poorly. A cry suddenly rang out from upstairs, a servant's scream, thin and pierced with terror. Poirot's eyes shot upward. Inspector, Clara cried, rising. Poirot was already moving, up the staircase 2 steps at a time, past the portraits, past the shadows that clung to the walls like old secrets, toward the source of the scream. And as he ran, Poirot understood one thing with chilling certainty. The murderer hadn't fled. The murderer had just claimed another victim. Chapter 6. The Silent Witness. The scream came from the upper landing, sharp, keening, and abruptly cut off, as though a hand had clamped over a terrified mouth. Poirot reached the top of the stairs with startling speed for a man of his age, his polished shoes whispering over the runner. The corridor stretched before him like a long, dark artery pulsing with dread. A maid stood halfway down the hall, pressed flat against the wall, hands over her mouth. Her eyes were round, glassy, and fixed on something just out of view. Ma petite, Poirot said gently. Step aside. She shook her head rapidly, trembling so hard her cap nearly slipped off. Inspector Graves barreled up behind Poirot. Out of the way, girl, he barked. She squeaked and darted aside, giving them a clear view. A bedroom door hung wide open, and inside, face down on the rug like a discarded doll, lay one of the youngest maids, Lydia. Poirot and Graves entered in unison. The girl was motionless. Poirot knelt beside her, fingers careful and precise. He checked her pulse. Alive, barely. Inspector? Poirot murmured. Fetch Dr. Brigham at once. But even as he spoke, Lydia stirred weakly, a faint whimper escaping her lips. Poirot leaned closer. "Shh, mademoiselle. Do not speak more than necessary. Tell me, what happened?" Her eyes fluttered open. Panic flashed in them like lightning. She lifted one trembling hand and pointed toward the wardrobe in the corner. Poirot's gaze snapped toward it. The wardrobe door was ajar. "Someone was here," Lydia whispered, "behind the coat, watching." Poirot rose instantly, motioning Graves back. In 2 strides, he crossed the room, seized the wardrobe door, and flung it wide, empty, but not untouched. Inside, the scent of cigarette smoke lingered, light, perfumed, unmistakably French. Poirot exhaled slowly. "So, our elusive visitor hides in plain scent." The inspector scowled. "Could be anyone." "No," Poirot said quietly. "Only one in this house smokes such cigarettes." But he did not yet say who. Instead, he turned his attention to Lydia, who was struggling to sit up. Poirot gently helped her to lean against the wall. "What did you see?" he asked softly. "Tell Hercule Poirot." Lydia swallowed, tears streaking her pale cheeks. I was cleaning the room. This one belongs to Miss Clara. I heard breathing, heavy, from the wardrobe. I opened the door and..." Her scream fractured the air before she could finish. She clutched Poirot's wrist. He was masked, tall. He grabbed me, tried to choke me. I scratched him, I think. Poirot's mind clicked. "Inspector," he said, "have someone check the other rooms. The intruder could still be here." Graves was already issuing commands to the constable stationed nearby. Poirot turned back to Lydia. "Did you recognize the clothing? Shoes? Anything?" She shook her head. "All dark. A coat with a high collar, gloves. He smelled of cigarettes," Poirot finished. She nodded. Poirot stood, every line of his posture sharpening with focus. "A bold attack," he murmured. "Too bold. This was not meant to kill the girl. This was meant to frighten, to silence." Graves re-entered. "The doctor is on his way. The rest of the rooms are clear." Poirot nodded once. Then the assailant escaped quickly, possibly down the servants' stairwell. He paced the room slowly, eyes roaming from corner to corner. Something caught his attention. A faint scuff on the window frame. Poirot approached, examining it closely. "A footprint," he said, "small, light." Graves leaned in. "Not a man's." Poirot shook his head. "Nor a child's. A woman's." Graves blinked. "But Lydia said it was a tall man." Poirot allowed himself a thin, thoughtful smile. "When fear rules the eyes, Inspector, even shadows grow in size." He stood fully, turning to Clara Davenport's writing desk. Because something there glinted faintly. Poirot approached and found a ribbon tucked into the edge of a drawer. Not Clara's typical style, she preferred practical attire. A pale blue ribbon. Poirot lifted it delicately. "This," he mused, "was left in haste." The maid from the corridor gasped. "That's Miss Eleanor's. She wore it often." A silence fell that seemed to seep beneath the floorboards. Poirot placed the ribbon on the desk with reverence. "Inspector Graves," he said, "someone entered Miss Davenport's room with an item belonging to the dead woman, either to hide it or to plant it." Clara arrived in that very moment, storming into the corridor with fury. "What's happening? Why is everyone screaming? Why is Lydia hurt?" Poirot approached her with calm gravity. "Mademoiselle," he said, "your room was entered by an intruder." Clara blanched. "My room? By whom?" Poirot studied her face, that flicker of fear. Or was it guilt? "That," Poirot said softly, "is what we must determine." Clara's voice dropped to a whisper. Is this about Edmund's journal? About what Eleanor discovered?" Poirot held her gaze. "Everything is about what Eleanor discovered." Rosalind Thornberry appeared at the end of the hall, distraught. Poirot, what on earth has happened? Poirot took one measured step toward her. Madam, he said, you told me you visited Eleanor's room the night before her death. You say she warned you away, but did she also give you something? Rosalind froze. Poirot's voice darkened. Because someone left Eleanor's ribbon in Clara Davenport's room. Someone either careless or cunning. Rosalind swallowed. I don't know what you mean. Poirot stepped closer. Do not lie, madame, not now. Lives depend on the truth. Before Rosalind could answer, Dr. Brigham rushed into the hallway, panting. What's happened? He asked, kneeling beside Lydia. Poirot observed him for a long, cold second. He saw it then. A scratch, thin, fresh, running along the back of Brigham's left hand. Lydia's eyes widened when she saw it. That's him, she whispered. That's... Brigham recoiled. No, I got that from Malcolm's doorframe when we carried him upstairs. Graves stepped forward. Show me your gloves. Brigham stammered, pale. Why? Poirot closed his eyes briefly as though offering a silent prayer. Then he opened them, their clarity diamond sharp. Because, he said, the intruder wore gloves, and if those gloves are yours, doctor, they will still smell of perfumed French tobacco. Brigham backed away. This is absurd. Poirot, you're chasing shadows. Poirot advanced a step. Non, docteur. I chase the truth, and now it stands before me. He reached toward Brigham's coat pocket. Brigham slapped Poirot's hand away. The corridor froze. Poirot's voice dropped to a whisper sharp as a blade. Inspector Graves, he said. The gloves. Now. Graves seized Brigham's arms. The doctor struggled, but Graves was stronger. He wrested the gloves from Brigham's inner pocket. The moment Graves opened them, a soft, unmistakable aroma unfurled. Perfumed. Sweet. Foreign. Poirot's voice fell like a verdict. The same scent from Eleanor's room. Brigham sagged in Graves' grip, face ash-gray. Doctor, Poirot said quietly, you were the last to see Edmund alive. The first to hear Eleanor's fears. The one who knew which bottle Sir Malcolm would reach for. And now, you terrify a maid to silence her. Brigham's breath trembled. You don't understand. Poirot stepped forward, voice grave. Then help me. Explain. For now, doctor, your silence is louder than any denial. But before Brigham could speak, a thunderous bang echoed from downstairs, the front door thrown open. Poirot spun toward the staircase. The murderer, whether Brigham or another, had made their move, and someone was escaping into the storm. Chapter 7. The man who ran into the storm. The night had turned violent. Rain lashed the manor's stone facade in sheets, and wind clawed at the gutters like a furious beast. When the front door slammed open below, the entire household seemed to jolt as if struck by lightning. Poirot reached the stairs first, his hand gliding along the banister for balance. Graves thundered after him, still gripping Dr. Brigham by the collar. The physician twisted violently, breaking free with a force that surprised them all. He bolted down the stairs like a man possessed. "Stop him!" Graves barked. But the doctor had already reached the front hall where the great oak door stood wide, shuddering in the wind. Without hesitation, Brigham plunged into the darkness beyond. Poirot stopped just inside the threshold. Rain whipped against his face. The grounds of Thornbury Manor had become a blur, shadows, mud, and the wild thrash of ancient trees bending under the storm. "Inspector," Poirot said, "your men must secure the exits. No one gets past the gates." Graves signaled the constables and ran into the storm after Brigham. Poirot followed, but more slowly, his pace deliberate, calculating. Running blindly in a tempest was not his strength, nor his method. He paused under the shelter of the stone archway, eyes narrowing as he observed the chaos of footprints rapidly dissolving into the mud. Where would he go? Poirot murmured. Not toward the road, Too exposed, too obvious. Then he saw it, a flicker of movement near the edge of the hedge maze. "Ah," Poirot whispered, "of course." He stepped out into the rain, shoulders hunched, mustache flattened by the wind. His polished shoes sank immediately into the sodden earth. Yet he moved with quiet assurance toward the sprawling maze of yew hedges. Behind him, Clara Davenport appeared in the doorway, clutching a shawl around her trembling shoulders. "Poirot, don't go in there. It's impossible to navigate even in daylight." Poirot turned his head slightly. "That, mademoiselle, is precisely why a desperate man chooses it as his refuge." Clara's voice cracked. "But why would Dr. Brigham run? Is he truly the one responsible for all of this?" Poirot's expression softened. "Guilt takes many forms, mademoiselle. Some run from justice, others run from fear. And some," Clara whispered, "from secrets." Poirot gave a slow, acknowledging nod. "Go inside. Stay with Rosalind. Lock the doors. I will return." And then, without waiting for her reply, he stepped into the maze. Wind roared between the hedges, making the leaves hiss and writhe like serpents. Poirot advanced carefully, his keen eyes studying the ground whenever the lightning offered a brief flash of illumination. Footprints. Smudged, waterlogged, but there. He followed them inward, listening for any sound beyond the storm's feral howl. After several twisting turns, Poirot came to a small clearing at the maze's heart, a stone fountain adorned with a weathered statue of Artemis. The water sloshed violently under the rain. Poirot paused. Brigham was here. Poirot sensed it, like a presence lingering at the edge of sight. "Doctor," he called, raising his voice over the wind. "Enough running. There is nowhere left to go." A voice answered from behind the statue, ragged and desperate. "You don't understand, Poirot. I never meant to hurt her." Poirot stepped slowly toward the fountain. "Then help me understand," he said. "Help me prevent further suffering." Brigham emerged from the shadows. Rain plastered his hair to his forehead. His coat hung heavy with water. But his eyes, they burned with the fevered intensity of a cornered man. "Eleanor came to me," Brigham said. "The night she died, she was terrified. She told me she'd uncovered something about Edmund's death." Poirot remained silent. "She begged me to protect her. But when I confronted Sir Malcolm, he denied it all. Said Eleanor was unstable, imagining conspiracies." Poirot's voice cut softly between raindrops. "And you believed him?" "I didn't know what to believe," Brigham cried. "But then Eleanor insisted she had proof, something written, a letter she'd found hidden among Edmund's things." Poirot exhaled. "The missing letter. The one your gloves reveal you sought to retrieve." Brigham shook his head violently. "I didn't hurt her. I swear it on my life. I only wanted the letter because I feared she might expose something that would destroy the family." "Destroy Sir Malcolm?" Poirot asked. Brigham's silence was telling. Poirot's gaze sharpened. "You knew Sir Malcolm was having an affair with Eleanor." Brigham closed his eyes. "She told me everything that night. She said Edmund had discovered the affair shortly before his death. And that his journal held the evidence," Poirot added. Brigham nodded, trembling. "If the truth came out, if the scandal broke, Malcolm's reputation, the household, everything, it would ruin us all." Poirot's voice hardened. "So someone silenced Eleanor before she could speak." Brigham's eyes widened. "It wasn't me. I found her after she fell. She was already dying. I tried to revive her, I swear it." Poirot studied him carefully. In the pale flashes of lightning, he saw something raw in Brigham's expression. Not guilt. Grief. Before Poirot could speak, a new sound cut through the storm, rapid footsteps splashing through mud. Graves burst into the clearing with two constables, revolver raised. Brigham, don't move! Brigham threw up his hands. Poirot raised a calming palm. Inspector, lower your weapon. Graves scowled. He assaulted a maid, hid evidence, fled custody. All true, Poirot said, but perhaps not the actions of a murderer, only a frightened accomplice. The doctor sagged with relief, then stiffened as Graves seized his wrists. Poirot stepped forward. Doctor, listen to me closely. Who else knew about Eleanor's letter? Brigham hesitated. Poirot leaned in. Her killer knew, had to know, or she would still be alive. Brigham swallowed. I don't know who she shared it with, but I do know she was planning to show it to someone. A member of the household. She said this person would finally see the truth. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Who? Brigham whispered a single name. Poirot froze. Lightning split the sky. Thunder roared like the earth cracking open. And in that violent illumination, Poirot knew the true murderer was not the man trembling before him, but someone still inside Thornbury Manor, someone now aware that Poirot was closing in. Poirot turned abruptly to Graves. Get him inside. Guard him. Do not let him speak to anyone. And you? Graves asked. Poirot looked back toward the looming silhouette of the manor. I go, Poirot said softly, to confront the one person clever enough to orchestrate all of this. He stepped out of the maze, and the storm swallowed him whole. Chapter 8. The Confession That Never Came. The storm had quieted to a steady drizzle by the time Poirot approached the manor once more. The lamps in the great hall glowed weakly through the rain-streaked windows, casting elongated shadows across the gardens. Thornbury Manor looked less like a home and more like a fortress holding its secrets close. Poirot paused at the front steps, his mind sharpening like a blade honed against stone. Brigham's final whispered name echoed in his thoughts. Rosalind, the governess whose quiet sorrow masked an iron composure. The woman Eleanor had trusted, the one who claimed to have seen nothing, heard nothing, suspected nothing, too clean, too careful, and always precisely where she needed to be. Poirot stepped inside. The warmth of the hall hit him immediately, a stark contrast to the cold, wet air outside, but another kind of chill met him, the tense stillness of a house holding its breath. Clara Davenport approached from the drawing room, her face pale but composed. Poirot, did you find him? Yes, mademoiselle, Poirot replied quietly. Dr. Brigham is safe and under guard. Clara's shoulders sagged, relief and confusion mingling in her eyes. Was he the one? The killer? Poirot removed his soaked coat and hat, handing them to a footman. No. His guilt lies in cowardice, not in murder. Clara's eyes flicked toward the staircase. Then, who? Poirot did not answer. Instead, he lifted a hand. Where is Rosalind? Clara hesitated. In the music room. She said the storm was giving her a headache. Poirot nodded once. Thank you. Go to your room, mademoiselle. Lock the door and wait until this is finished. A tremor passed across her face, but she obeyed. Poirot walked down the corridor. Each step fell softly on the carpeted floor, yet the silence of the house made them echo like drumbeats. The faint sound of piano notes drifted toward him, the hesitant plinking of a few keys, not a melody but a nervous fidgeting of fingers. Poirot reached the door of the music room and paused. He straightened his posture. He smoothed his mustache. Then he knocked once and entered. Rosalind sat on the piano bench, back straight, hands resting lightly on the keys. Her dark hair was pinned neatly, not a strand out of place. But her eyes, when she looked up, they held something new. Weariness, wariness, and the faintest hint of resignation. Ah, Monsieur Poirot, she said softly. You look as though the storm has swallowed you and returned the leftovers. Poirot smiled mildly. The storm has merely washed away the final veil of illusion, mademoiselle. Rosalind's fingers froze over the keys. Poirot continued before she could speak. Dr. Brigham told me something most enlightening. Eleanor came to him on the night of her death. She confided that she possessed proof, written proof, about Sir Edmund's demise. Proof she intended to show to someone she trusted. Rosalind's gaze remained steady. And you believe that person was me? Poirot inclined his head. Eleanor trusted you implicitly. You were her confidant, her friend. But she did not know, mademoiselle, that you also had the strongest motive to ensure that whatever she had discovered never saw the light of day. A faint tremor passed through Rosalind's shoulders. What motive could I possibly have? Poirot stepped deeper into the room, hands clasped behind his back. You loved Sir Edmund, Poirot said quietly. The word struck like a stone dropped into a still pond. Rosalind inhaled sharply but did not deny it. I observed it from the first, mademoiselle, Poirot went on. Your reaction to the mention of his name, the tenderness in your voice when you described him, the anger so carefully concealed when you spoke of Eleanor. Rosalind stood abruptly from the piano bench. This is absurd. I was devoted to the family, yes, but... And yet, Poirot interrupted gently, you have never worn mourning for Eleanor, not even a token, because your grief was never for her. Rosalind's lips parted, trembling. She ruined him, she whispered. Eleanor was reckless, selfish. She drove Sir Edmund to despair. Poirot's eyes softened. And when Eleanor confided that she had found evidence implicating Sir Malcolm in Edmund's death, she did not realize that her words would reignite your fury. Rosalind sank back onto the bench, her voice barely audible. I only wanted her to stop spreading lies, to stop tormenting those who had already suffered enough. Poirot stepped closer. Eleanor was not lying. Sir Edmund was planning to leave the manor, to escape Sir Malcolm's control. The letter in his journal proves this. A letter he never sent, but one Eleanor found. Rosalind's breath hitched. Poirot continued, voice low and deliberate. Eleanor intended to show the letter to you. She believed you, of all people, would understand its significance. She trusted you. And in that trust, she sealed her fate. Rosalind pressed a hand to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes, not sudden grief, but a grief long buried, years old. I didn't mean to kill her, she whispered. I only wanted to frighten her, to make her stop. Poirot lowered his voice. Tell me what happened, Rosalind. Rosalind closed her eyes. When she came to me that night, she said. She was frantic. She showed me the letter. She said Edmund had discovered something terrible about his father. Something that made him fear for his life. She said Edmund had been preparing to leave. Her hands tightened into fists. I told her she was being hysterical, that she needed rest. But she wouldn't stop talking. She accused everyone. She accused me of not caring. She said Edmund had confided in her more than he ever had in me. A bitter laugh escaped her. I snapped. I grabbed her arm. She pulled away too quickly and lost her balance. She stumbled backward, hit the banister. Rosalind's voice broke. Poirot's expression remained solemn. And in panic you tried to stage it, to make it look like an accident. Rosalind nodded numbly. I told myself it was the truth, an accident. But the moment she fell, I knew. I knew I had destroyed the last piece of him that remained. Poirot softly drew a handkerchief from his pocket and placed it on the piano. Rosalind looked at it, then at him. Are you going to call for the inspector? Poirot shook his head. No, mademoiselle, you will call him. Rosalind exhaled a trembling breath. She rose to her feet, but before she could take a step, The door burst open. Sir Malcolm stood in the doorway, his face a contorted mask of rage. "You will do no such thing, Rosalind." Poirot's eyes widened. Rosalind gasped, and in that moment Poirot knew. The most dangerous chapter of the mystery had just begun. Chapter 9. The Storm Behind the Walls. Sir Malcolm filled the doorway like a dark monolith, his chest heaving, rain dripping from his coat as though he'd walked straight through the storm without feeling a drop. His eyes, cold, wide, furious, were fixed not on Poirot, but on Rosalind. She froze where she stood. Poirot stepped subtly between them, raising one hand. "Sir Malcolm," he said calmly, "you arrive at a delicate moment." "Silence, Poirot," Malcolm snarled. "I heard every word. Rosalind will not utter another syllable to the police." Rosalind flinched as if struck. Poirot tilted his head, mustache twitching. "You wish to shield her from the consequences of her actions." Malcolm's expression twisted. "You know nothing of what this family has endured. Rosalind has already suffered enough." His jaw clenched. "I won't let her be destroyed." Poirot observed him carefully. "You speak as though you knew of her feelings for Edmund." Malcolm hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. But Poirot caught it. "I know everything that happens in my house," Malcolm said tightly. "Indeed," Poirot replied, "but I suspect there is one thing you hoped would never come to light." Malcolm stiffened. Poirot continued, voice soft as velvet, cutting as glass. "That Edmund's death was no accident," Rosalind gasped softly. "Monsieur Poirot, what are you implying?" Poirot did not look away from Malcolm. "I imply nothing," he said. "I state a deduction. Sir Edmund discovered something damning about his father. Eleanor found evidence of it in his journals. Evidence she shared with Rosalind the night she died." Malcolm's face paled. "Lies," he barked. "My son was ill, disturbed. He wasn't in his right mind." Poirot shook his head. "No, Sir Malcolm. Edmund was planning to leave. The letter Eleanor showed to Rosalind proves this. He feared for his life. And it was you he feared." Malcolm took a step forward, fists clenched. "Enough!" Poirot held his ground. "Why did you fear Eleanor's confession?" Poirot asked quietly. "Why did you attempt to silence Rosalind just now? Why?" Poirot's eyes hardened. "Did you tell your household that Edmund fell from his horse on the western path, when the bruising on his ribs suggested the fall occurred elsewhere at an entirely different angle?" Malcolm froze. It was the stillness of a beast preparing to strike. Rosalind clutched the edge of the piano. "Sir Malcolm, you told me his injuries were—" "Rosalind," Malcolm said sharply, "leave us." Poirot blocked her path with a subtle motion. "She stays. She has earned the truth." Malcolm's composure cracked. "You meddling little—" But a voice rang down the hall. "Sir Malcolm!" Inspector Graves appeared in the doorway, revolver drawn, 2 constables flanking him. "Stand back!" Malcolm's shoulders dropped, tension rippling across them like a wave. Poirot stepped aside, hands folded. "Inspector, you arrive at an opportune moment." Graves' eyes darted between Rosalind, Poirot, and Malcolm. "I heard shouting. What's going on?" Poirot gestured for him to wait. "Let Sir Malcolm speak." Malcolm's voice came out low, hoarse, vibrating with years of buried fury. "You want the truth? Here it is." He strode into the room, ignoring the revolver pointed at him. "Edmund was weak," Malcolm spat, "soft, unfit to inherit anything I built. He let Eleanor poison his mind, filling his head with fantasies of escape, of rebellion. She convinced him that I was his enemy, that I controlled him." Poirot's voice sharpened. "And you did you not?" Malcolm ignored him, eyes fixed on Rosalind. "I tried to reason with him, to make him see sense, but he refused. He said he would leave the manor, expose our family's corruption. He said Eleanor would help him. His chest heaved. So yes, I confronted him at the stables. He tried to push past me. We struggled. He fell. Rosalind pressed a hand to her mouth, trembling. It was an accident, Malcolm said, voice cracking. He slipped. I never meant, Poirot interrupted gently. Then why did you hide the truth? Malcolm's eyes shone with a terrible mix of guilt and pride. Because a Davenport does not die in disgraceful chaos, and because if Eleanor revealed what she knew, the world would blame me anyway. Poirot's tone hardened. So you silenced her. Malcolm bristled. I did no such. Do not lie, Poirot cut in. You followed her that night. You saw her meet Rosalind. You overheard her speak about the letter she intended to share. Malcolm's face contorted. I only wanted to stop her from spreading more madness. Poirot shook his head. Perhaps, but it was Rosalind's confrontation, not yours, that caused her fatal fall. Rosalind collapsed onto the piano bench, covering her face with shaking hands. Poirot turned back to Malcolm. You arrived moments after she fell, and instead of seeking help, you chose to protect your family's secrets. You moved the body. You wiped the banister. You manipulated Dr. Brigham into believing Eleanor's mental state was unstable. Malcolm's jaw clenched. Poirot's voice lowered. You did not kill her. But everything that followed was your doing. Graves stepped forward, voice steady. Sir Malcolm Davenport, you are under arrest for obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and involvement in the cover-up of a suspicious death. Rosalind let out a broken sob. Malcolm looked at her, not with anger, but a deep, almost paternal sorrow. Rosalind, you must not confess. You understand, you must not. Poirot stepped beside her. She already has, Sir Malcolm, but her crime was born of emotion, not malice, and her remorse is genuine. The court will judge her fairly. Malcolm stared at her for a long moment. Then something inside him seemed to collapse. His shoulders sagged. His eyes dimmed. He held out his wrists. Do what you must, he whispered. Graves placed him in handcuffs. As the constables led Malcolm away, Rosalind turned to Poirot. I loved Edmund more than life, she said. But I never imagined, never dreamed, that his own father... Poirot placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Grief twists the soul in strange ways, mademoiselle. But now, at last, the truth is free. Rosalind's tears fell silently. Poirot looked toward the dark corridor where Malcolm had been taken. The storm had ended outside, but inside Thornbury Manor another storm, one of guilt, secrets, and fractured hearts, had finally broken. Chapter 10. Dawn at Thornbury Manor. Dawn crept slowly across the estate as though uncertain whether Thornbury Manor was ready for light again. Pale gold filtered through the tall windows, touching the marble floors, brushing the banister where Eleanor had taken her final desperate step. The storm had passed, leaving only the scent of wet earth and the quiet drip of water from the gutters. Poirot stood in the drawing room staring at the cold fireplace. His small figure was still, his posture immaculate, his mind, ever precise, wrapping up the final threads of the investigation. Inspector Graves entered quietly. Poirot, he said. They've taken Sir Malcolm to the county jail. Rosalind will be brought in for questioning shortly. Poirot nodded without turning. A sad business, mon ami. A tragedy woven of grief, pride, and silence. Graves exhaled heavily. You truly believe Rosalind didn't intend to kill Eleanor? Most certainly, Poirot replied. Her actions were impulsive. Emotion surged, and she sought only to restrain, to stop the flood of accusations. But accidents born of passion can be as deadly as any calculated blow. Graves rubbed his temples. And Malcolm, He'll face charges for the cover-up, but not for Edmund's death. That, at least, appears genuinely accidental. Poirot finally turned toward him. Yes, a moment of uncontrolled anger, but his greatest crime was pride. He believed he alone knew what was best for his family. Yet every step he took to protect them only sealed their ruin. Graves nodded grimly. We'll handle the legalities from here. You've done your part. Poirot offered a small bow of the head. It is the duty of Hercule Poirot to bring order where chaos reigns. The inspector left him in peace. Soft footsteps approached from the hallway. Clara Davenport entered, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion but clearer than they had been in days. She wore a simple morning gown, her hair pulled back neatly as though attempting to restore some sense of normalcy to a house that would never be normal again. Poirot, she said quietly, may I speak with you? Of course, mademoiselle. She moved to stand beside him at the window, watching the grounds shimmer under the new sunlight. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered. The truth, it is unbearable, and yet also a relief. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back. Truth is often a double-edged sword. It cuts, but it also frees. Clara closed her eyes, a tear sliding down her cheek. All these years I believed my father was stern but honorable, that my brother's death was a tragic accident, that Eleanor's passing was fate. Now I see how much darkness lived within these walls. Poirot did not interrupt. Clara wiped her face. And Rosalind, she was like family to me. She raised me, taught me, comforted me. I never imagined she carried such a burden. She loved your brother, Poirot said gently. And love can twist even the most steadfast heart. Clara nodded slowly. Will she go to prison? Poirot sighed. That is for the courts to decide, but her remorse is sincere, her cooperation complete, and her actions were unpremeditated. That will matter. Clara placed a hand on the windowsill. I want to speak on her behalf when the time comes. She made a terrible mistake, but she is not a monster. Poirot smiled softly. Your compassion does you great credit, mademoiselle. Clara turned to face him fully. And what will happen now? To the estate? To the Davenport name? Poirot raised an eyebrow. That, I think, is a future you will shape. She blinked, surprised. Me? Who else remains with a sound mind and a kind heart? Poirot asked gently. Thornbury Manor must rebuild itself. You must rebuild it. Clara drew a steadying breath. Then I will try. Poirot bowed slightly. That is all any of us can do. A soft knock sounded on the door. Rosalind entered, flanked by 2 constables. She looked pale but calm, eerily calm, as though she had made peace with her fate. Monsieur Poirot, she said, may I speak with you before I go? The constables exchanged a glance, then stepped back but remained at the door. Poirot approached her. Mademoiselle Rosaline. She lifted her chin. I wish to thank you. Not for exposing me, no, but for allowing me to tell the truth before my courage failed. Poirot inclined his head. Truth is a heavy burden, but it grows heavier still when left unsaid. Tears glistened at the corners of Rosalind's eyes. I loved Edmund. I loved him as deeply as any woman can love, and yet I could not save him, nor could I bear the thought of losing the last memory of him when Eleanor threatened to reveal everything. Poirot's voice softened. Guilt does not vanish with confession, but remorse can guide you toward a better path. Rosalind gave him a fragile smile. Perhaps, if I am given the chance. She turned to Clara, who approached slowly. Rosalind, Clara whispered. Rosalind bowed her head. I failed you, I failed everyone. Clara shook her head firmly. No, you treated me with kindness all my life. You gave me love when this house offered none. I will stand by you, whatever comes." For the first time since her confession, Rosalind truly broke. She reached out and Clara embraced her tightly. Poirot watched quietly. After a few moments, the constable stepped forward. Rosalind straightened, wiped her tears, and nodded. "I am ready." She left without another word, her footsteps soft against the polished floors. The day had brightened fully by the time Poirot fetched his hat and coat from the stand. The footman held the door open for him. As Poirot stepped outside, the crisp morning air filled his lungs. The manor loomed behind him, still grand, still imposing, yet somehow hollowed of its former arrogance. Graves waited near the carriage. "Leaving already?" he asked. Poirot nodded. "My work here is done, Inspector." Graves scratched the back of his neck. "You know, for a while there I thought Brigham was guilty, then Rosalind, then Malcolm, then Rosalind again." He chuckled ruefully. "You certainly know how to keep a man guessing." Poirot smiled modestly. "It is not my place to guess, my friend. Only to observe. The truth always reveals itself to eyes that choose to see." Graves extended his hand. "Until next time, Poirot." Poirot shook it. "Indeed, though I hope your next case involves fewer storms of both weather and temperament." Graves laughed. "We can only hope." Poirot climbed into the carriage. The driver snapped the reins and the carriage began its slow descent down the long gravel path. As Thornbury Manor receded behind him, Poirot closed his eyes. Another case resolved, another tragedy laid bare, another reminder that the heart, far more than the mind, was capable of the deadliest secrets. But that was the work of Hercule Poirot. To sift through the shadows, to unmask the truth, to restore order to a world always teetering on the edge of chaos. And so, with the rising sun warming his face, Poirot allowed himself the rare luxury of rest until the next mystery called his name.